Meet Aralyn. Aralyn was one of our Kids Compose runners-up in 2020. Our workshop was held online due to COVID restrictions, but Aralyn still made the most of her opportunity to explore her composition, Young Pharoh, with a small group of musicians, including violin, guitar, flute, clarinet, horn, and trombone. We began with Aralyn sharing a bit about her composition and creative process.
I wrote it for violin mainly, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your process, what you did.
Well, so I played the melody on a piano and I figured it out like on a keyboard. And then I played it on my violin later to see how it sounded.
Here is Young Pharoh as originally conceived. Before exploring possibilities on the other instruments, Aralyn and I discussed some of the techniques she used that are idiomatic for the violin and how they may or may not work for the other instruments. First up, pizzicato, or plucking the strings.
I mainly wrote it for just strings, like any string player that could read treble clef.
So how about we have the other string player play it, but let's think about this first. What do you think is going to be different on her instrument than on the violin?
Well, she doesn't have a bow, so she's already doing pizzicato.
Julia, everything you do is pizzicato, yes?
Not for me. So technically, in your terms, I always play pizzicato because I'm always plucking. But on the guitar, when you play pizzicato, you actually mute the strings with your hand. So instead of hearing the open string like this, I'm gonna mute it, and you'll hear this.
It has a different tone. Mm-hmm. The guitar, it sounds different from violin.
Let's try one of the brass instruments. Which one would you want to hear first?
I always thought French horn was really interesting.
Cool. In French horn, let's find out about this. Michaela, can you pizzicato? I want to see that.
I do have strings, but I do not pluck them to make sound.
The strings on a horn to which Michaela was referring don't produce any sound. They tie the keys to the valves, so the string's job is to help the horn player open and close the valves, which creates different notes. Now, back to pizzicato. How would a horn player interpret that instruction when they don't have any strings to pluck?
When she did
well, you can't really do pizzicato.
So what did she do?
Yes. I don't know how to explain it.
Okay, so she didn't make it smooth and long and legato. So what did she maybe do with it?
She made it staccato.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Staccato is a technique where notes are shorter. Musicians create space between the notes by detaching them from the notes before and after. The other non-string musicians also interpreted pizzicato on their instruments by using staccato. You may have noticed in that last example that there was something stuck in the bell of the trombone. That brings us to our next musical technique, which just happens to coincide with the pizzicato indicated in the music. Con sordino, or with a mute.
You put con sordino. So what does that mean?
It means mute.
For muting, I have this mute. It's a straight mute. It's going to make my sound a little bit softer. So if I play one note with it in versus with it out, gives it a different sound. And I have a second kind of mute, which is called a stopped mute, which is going to be a little brassier and nasally. And that gets a different sound. So I'll let you choose. Do you want stopped or straight mute?
I think the stopped mute, the second one, is a little bit more like what I'm looking for.
Okay.
For the mutes, unlike the French horn, we have a ton of mutes. We have straight mutes in like different kinds of metals. Here's the metal straight. Here's a wooden straight. They're made with like rose brass and like copper and like any kind of metal that you think of a trombone mute's been made out of. They have bucket mutes, which create more of a covered sound, cup mutes. Any sound that you try to make that sounds like a voice, they've probably tried to do it or make metal that's made it able to do it. This mute in particular, straight mute, is probably the most standard mute. This is what it sounds like normally. And then with the mute, just goes in the bell.
The violin mutes are so tiny. They're like so much different.
Yeah.
You just put them on the bridge,
Right.
sort of to stop the vibration a little bit on the strings.
The last note in Young Pharoh is marked with 3 slightly slanted horizontal lines, which indicates tremolo for that note. Tremolo is a fast repetition of a note or between 2 notes.
And what about that last tremolo thing? On strings, we do it with our bow. You notice that the guitar, she did it like just going super fast with her fingers. What did she do on flute to make that really cool sound? Can you just play that last note for us again, Sion?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm basically doing trrrr to make the rolling sound.
I want to hear the clarinet. Isn't there like on clarinets and isn't there like a reed or something on a clarinet?
There is a reed that goes on, so you can see it's like a piece of cane. It's like a piece of wood that I put on the mouthpiece, and it gets held on. So then the reed is kind of strapped onto the mouthpiece like that, and that's how when I blow air through it, it vibrates, and that's how it makes the sound. It can do the flutter tongue as well, but instead of doing it, we literally do it over the reed, where our tongues kind of flap back and forth across the reed.
There was one last issue to discuss before Aralyn chose whether she was going to stick with her original version of violin only or use some of the other instruments for her piece. In the last measure on the top line, she wrote 2 notes at the same time, referred to as a double stop.
And on the violin and one other instrument, they've been able to do that double stops that you have. What was the other instrument that could do that? Who do you think could play 2 notes at the same time?
The guitar.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the guitar they do the strings too.
Aralyn's tune changed as she experimented with the various possibilities, expanding from one known instrument to an interesting arrangement, even changing intended techniques to accommodate new, diverse sounds.
I wrote it for violin mainly. I'm used to this like certain like string instrument sound. My two favorites so far are how it sounds on the clarinet and the French horn. I think I liked maybe the flute. I like the woodwinds. I don't know which one I like the most.
Decision time. Aralyn's arrangement.
The whole first line. I want flute.
Through the double stops, and you just want her to play the top note?
Yeah. Wait, can she play the bottom note?
Sure.
The A.
Okay. And then what about going on?
Maybe violin.
Where you have concerty, the 5/4 part.
Maybe trombone.
And what about the tremolo, that
Okay.
last measure?
I like the clarinet.
So we're doing flute on the first line, playing the bottom note, and then and then violin, and then the pizzicato part on trombone. That I never thought I'd say that sentence ever in my life. And then the flutter tongue, the tremolo on the clarinet.